A massive fleet of warships emerged from warp space, armed and with shields at maximum capacity. 300 ships against 42, a hopeless battle, a suicide mission, and yet an entire human fleet had arrived, answering the desperate plea of the aliens who had once saved a single human life. "Begin the attack," Admiral Rodriguez ordered, his voice steely. "Today we honor a debt of 50 years, but how did it come to this? How did one act of compassion unleash a war that changed the galaxy 50 years ago?" The void of space was silent as Marcus Chin drifted aimlessly among the expanding wreckage of what had once been the Kepler 7 mining station. His distress beacon glowed red against the darkness. A futile cry for help. He had 6 hours of oxygen left. There was no hope of rescue. The evacuation signal came too late for those deep within the mine. Through his helmet visor, Marcus watched as the last escape pod vanished into space, taking with it the few fortunate souls who had been on the surface when the disaster occurred. At 26, Marcus represented the third generation of his family to work in the outer system mining operations. His grandfather had been among the first wave of prospectors to venture beyond Mars, and his father had died in an asteroid collapse when Marcus was 15. The Chen family had dedicated their lives to human space exploration, and now it seemed Marcus would join that legacy in the most definitive way. As he spoke into his suit's voice recorder, describing the unusual quantum resonant patterns he had observed before the disaster, Marcus noticed something that chilled him to the bone. The stars were moving. Not the slow, expected rotation, but a purposeful movement that suggested something enormous was approaching beyond his field of vision. Passive sensors in his suit began to detect energy signatures that didn't match any known human technology. Then a ship appeared. It materialized from seemingly empty space, reality warping around it like water flowing over stone. The ship was enormous, far surpassing the largest human battleships. And yet, it moved through space with an organic grace that defied the laws of physics. Its hull seemed grown rather than constructed, with smooth curves and surfaces shifting color like oil on water. Before he could even try to react, a beam of soft blue light enveloped him, and the sensation of floating in the void vanished. He found himself standing in what could only be described as a medical ward, albeit one designed by minds utterly alien to human thought. The walls seemed alive, gently pulsing with an inner light. All around him were beings that defied everything he thought he knew about life in the universe. They were tall and slender, with elongated limbs and translucent skin that revealed subtle patterns of light flowing beneath the surface. Most striking were their eyes, large, dark, and filled with an intelligence that seemed both ancient and infinitely compassionate. One of them approached Marcus with elegant calm. When it spoke, its words did not reach his ears but emerged in his mind with crystalline clarity. "Human, you are safe now. I am Healer Morin of the Taylorian Confluence. We detected your distress signal and could not allow a sentient being to perish in the void." Over the next few hours, as the Taylorian ship traveled through warped space, Marcus learned of his saviors. The Taylorians were an ancient race, possibly the oldest interstellar civilization in the galaxy. They spent millions of years exploring the cosmos, seeking knowledge rather than conquest. High Counselor Belthar explained to Marcus, "We saved you not because we expected reward or recognition, but because it was right. All life is precious, and consciousness is the rarest flower in the cosmic garden." When they finally reached human space, Belthar escorted Marcus to the airlock to say goodbye. The ancient being's luminous skin pulsed with patterns that Marcus had learned to recognize as signs of deep emotion. "Human Marcus Chen, remember this day. Remember that when your kind was alone and vulnerable in the darkness, the Taylorians offered aid, expecting nothing in return. We ask nothing of you or your kind, but know that the universe has its own way of balancing debts. Perhaps the day will come when we need help, and the memory of that compassion will guide the actions of your species." Marcus returned to Earth forever changed. The interrogations with the colonial administration lasted for weeks, but Marcus made sure to record every detail. The Taylorians had saved his life without any strings attached, and Marcus ensured that this debt was officially recorded in Earth's diplomatic archives. 50 years had flown by like the whisper of a cosmic wind. Marcus Chen, now 76, was 76, his gray hair and face lined with wrinkles that testified to decades of service to humanity's expansion among the stars. The galaxy had changed dramatically since his rescue. Humanity had established colonies in dozens of star systems, built massive space stations, and established contact with 17 different alien species. Some had become allies, others maintained neutral trade relations, and some were openly hostile. But the memory of floating alone in space, awaiting death, never left Marcus. He also remembered the kind beings who, owing him nothing, had saved him, asking nothing in return, except that this service, music, should have been a simple, routine intelligence report, but it changed everything. The transmission came over emergency channels from deep space, distorted by distance and interference. When the translation protocols finally deciphered the alien language, the words crashed into the council chamber like a physical blow. "To the people of Earth," said High Counselor Belthar of the Silurian Confluence. "It has been 50 of your years since we discovered one of your kind in danger and offered our aid. We asked nothing in return, because it was simply the right thing to do. However, now we face extinction. The Saphirian Empire has declared total war on our people. They seek not conquest, but the complete extermination of our species. Our worlds will burn, our people will perish, and our millennia-old civilization will crumble before their hatred. If you remember our duty, if you remember Marcus Chen, we humbly ask for your aid. We have no one else to turn to." The silence that followed was deafening. Around the council table, Earth's most powerful leaders tried to comprehend what they had just heard. The Saphirian Empire was well known to human minds, a militaristic race that controlled nearly 100 star systems through brutal conquest and oppression. Their military doctrine was based on the complete extermination of any species they considered genetically inferior, and their technology was among the most advanced in the known galaxy. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, the highest-ranking military officer on Earth, broke the silence with a grim tactical assessment. The strategic analysis was clear. The Taylorians faced genocide. Saphirian military doctrine demands the complete extermination of conquered species, leaving no survivors who might seek revenge in the future. Given their peaceful nature, the Taylorians have no effective military defense against this kind of attack. Defense Secretary Williams leaned forward, a worried expression on his face. "Admiral, while we all respect humanity's duty, we must consider practical reality. The Saphirians do not outnumber us by at least 50 to 1. Their ships are more advanced, their weapons more powerful, and their soldiers far more experienced. This is not our war, and if we interfere, we risk the destruction of human civilization." Marcus rose slowly from his seat, leaning on his cane as he struggled to his feet. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 7 decades of life and the memory of standing on the brink of death in the void of space. 50 years ago, this was not their war. The Taylorians explored, learned, and contributed to galactic knowledge. They could have ignored my distress call and continued on their way. No one would have judged them. Instead, they risked their mission, their time, and their resources to save one human life because they believed it was right. His voice grew firmer as he continued. Now they face extinction, and they ask for help from the only species in the galaxy that might understand what it means to be outnumbered. President Martinez, who had risen from junior diplomat to leader of humanity during Marcus's lifetime, looked around the table at her advisors. "The question we must answer is not whether we can win. The real question is whether we can live with ourselves if we don't even try. 50 years ago, a debt was imposed. Today, we decide whether humanity will keep its word." The vote was swift and unanimous. Within hours, mobilization orders were issued across human space. The Earth military began preparations for the largest interstellar operation in human history. A call was sent to every colony, every station, every outpost. Earth's debt would be repaid at any cost. The Strategic Command Center beneath Geneva was a hive of activity, and holographic displays showed fleet positions, supply lines, and tactical plans spanning half the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez stood in the center of the organized chaos, her calloused hands clasped behind her back, studying the enormous task before her. "Show me an update," she ordered her intelligence chief. Commander Park activated the main holographic display, filling the air with glowing statistics that painted a picture of impossible odds. Confirmed strength of the Saphirian Empire, 200 capital ships, including 37 planetary destroyers. Support ships, approximately 3 million troops. Estimated troop strength, 50 billion soldiers deployed in occupied territories. Earth Defense Force, 42 battleships, 160 escort vessels, and 2 million Marines of all branches. Rodriguez absorbed the numbers without batting an eye. He already knew the odds were zero by conventional metrics. And as for the Tylorians, their remaining fleet consists of only 31 ships, mostly converted civilian vessels used for evacuation. They were never a military power, Admiral. Their entire civilization was built on research, healing, and the preservation of knowledge. They have virtually no combat capabilities. The tactical computer ran probabilistic simulations 10,000 times, and every time the result was the same: the complete annihilation of the human forces within the first week of combat. By any standard of conventional warfare, Operation Duty was a suicide mission disguised as noble intentions. But humanity has built its entire history on achieving the impossible. Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the command center, carrying a sealed shipping container containing humanity's last, desperate attempt. As head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Division, she had spent the last decade pushing the boundaries of human engineering beyond its theoretical limits, often using captured alien technology as the basis for revolutionary breakthroughs. "Admiral, the prototypes are ready for field deployment," she announced, placing the case on the central holographic table. "Project Death Seed has exceeded all expectations." Rodriguez opened the case, revealing simple metal spheres, each roughly the size of a baseball. At first glance, they seemed laughably simple compared to the elegant energy weapons favored by most galactic civilizations. "Doctor, it looks like we could manufacture this in any orbital factory," remarked Captain James Mitchell, Rodriguez's tactical superior and strategic planning expert. Vasquez smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression that reminded everyone present why humans had earned a reputation as a dangerous species. "That's the point, Captain. The Saphirians, like most technologically advanced civilizations, have outgrown the use of kinetic weapons. Their defense systems are designed to reflect, absorb, or redirect energy attacks. They have forgotten the fundamental laws of mass and velocity physics." She activated a holographic projector, displaying detailed schematics of the spheres. Each Death Seed contains a miniature fusion reactor connected to a gravity pulse generator. When activated, it creates a localized gravity well that accelerates the sphere to approximately 15% the speed of light. At that speed, even such a small object collides with the force equivalent to a 50 megaton nuclear bomb. Mitchell watched the screen with growing fascination. Since it's purely kinetic and undirected energy, their shields won't even register it as a threat until impact. Vasquez confirmed that the Death Seeds would pierce their hulls like bullets through paper. "We've also developed improved versions for destroying capital ships, larger devices we call world destroyers, capable of cleaving a battleship in half." "Manufacturing capacity?" Rodriguez asked. "Manufacturing facilities on Earth and in the colonies have been retooled for 24/7 operation. By the time the fleet lands, we'll have approximately 50 Death Seeds and 200 world destroyers ready for deployment." The next phase of preparation involved something even more complex than developing a revolutionary weapon: training the fleet to use it in a way that confuses and overwhelms a superior enemy. Captain Mitchell spent months developing tactical doctrines that discarded centuries-old conventions of space warfare. "The Teferians are accustomed to fighting like-minded species," Mitchell explained to the fleet commanders during the final strategic planning session. "They expect orderly battle formations, predictable escalation patterns, and conventional tactical countermeasures. We will provide them with controlled chaos." The human fleet assembled at the Loomis rally point was unlike anything that had ever sailed the stars. At its core were 42 capital ships, led by Rodriguez's flagship, the Western Vengeance, a kilometer-long war beast armed with experimental weapons systems. Surrounding them were 160 escort ships, their hulls modified to accommodate Death Seed launchers and automated deployment systems. But the most unusual component of the fleet was its support elements. Unlike traditional military supply vessels, humanity had converted mining vessels, cargo ships, and even civilian passenger transports into mobile weapons platforms. Each carried thousands of Death Seeds and advanced deployment systems capable of transforming simple cargo ships into devastating missile batteries. To outside observers, most of the fleet looked more like a merchant convoy than a military armada. Marcus Chen, despite his advanced age and the protests of his medical staff, insisted on joining the expedition as a civilian advisor and cultural liaison. Rodriguez initially refused, but the old man's arguments were persuasive. He was the only person who had actually lived among the Tylorians and understood their mentality and culture. "They saved my life when I was young and foolish enough to think I was invincible," he told the admiral, standing on the Vengeance's observation deck, watching the ground behind them turn to blue marble. "Perhaps I can help save their lives. Besides, I'm the reason we're here. I believe it's only right to see this through." The journey to Silurian space took 3 weeks through warp space, during which the fleet constantly conducted combat exercises and honed tactical plans. The crews understood they were almost certainly heading to their deaths, but morale remained surprisingly high. Word of the mission's purpose spread throughout human space, and recruiting centers were overflowing with volunteers faster than they could process them. Everyone wanted to be part of the fleet that would give humanity its due. The journey to Silurian space was long, but not silent. Across the vast fleet, men and women prepared for battle in their own ways, some in quiet contemplation, others in intense training. All bore the burden of the mission. The salvation of an entire species rested on their shoulders. In the officers' mess aboard the Vengeance, Lieutenant Commander Maya Okafor was surrounded by holographic displays depicting the Tylorian civilization. An exobiologist by training before joining ground defense, she had volunteered immediately when the call came. "Their approach to knowledge is completely different from ours," she explained to the assembled officers. "While humans create science through competition and conflict, challenging theories and disproving hypotheses, the Tylorians have developed a collective consciousness. Their greatest scientific achievements were born from millions of minds working in telepathic harmony." She pointed to floating images of crystalline structures bending into impossible geometric shapes. "These are their libraries, living crystals that store not only information but also emotional context and sensory experience. When a Tylorian accesses knowledge, they don't simply learn facts, they re-experience the discovery, as if they were there in person. 50 million years of continuous civilization, preserved with absolute precision. And the Cypherians are destroying it all?" asked the young tactical officer. Maya confirmed systematically, her voice tense. "They don't just conquer, they erase every archive, every temple, every school, every living crystal garden. They don't just kill the Tylorians, they destroy their entire contribution to galactic knowledge." In another section of the ship, in the fighter hangar, squadron leader Raj Patel watched his pilots conduct combat simulations against Cypherian attacks. At 42, he was older than most fighter pilots. His face, scarred by the radiation of a dozen star systems, was the same as it had been when humanity first made contact with the crawlers, an encounter that ended in bloodshed and cemented the humans' reputation as dangerous creatures. Dwellers of death worlds, the Cypherians thought like reptiles. Because they are reptiles, he told his pilots, cold, calculating, hierarchical. They expect us to fight like them, with precise formations and a clear chain of command. For them, it's the only civilized way to wage war. He grinned, his expression more predatory than friendly. But we evolved from pack hunters, wolves. We stalk our prey over long distances, attack from multiple angles, and communicate on the move. While they wait for us to form a battle line, we'll already be firing on their flanks. In the infirmary, Dr. Sonny Mehta prepared his team for inevitable casualties. A veteran of 3 colonial conflicts, he'd seen what energy weapons do to the human body. His staff was young, many of them serving their first deployment. "I won't lie to you," he said quietly as they organized emergency supplies. "It will be hard, but remember why we are here. 50 years ago, the Taylorians saved human life because they believed all intelligent life was sacred. Today, we have the opportunity to save what remains of their entire species." He held up a small crystal pendant, a gift from Marcus Chen, who had distributed them to key fleet personnel. Their word, healer, roughly translates as pattern mover. They believe the universe is a vast, interconnected pattern, and each life is a thread in that fabric. Saving life means preserving the integrity of the fabric. Today, we fight not only for the Taylorians, we fight for a way of perceiving the universe that is in danger of being lost forever. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen spent hours in his chambers, surrounded by mementos of his time among the Taylorians. Though only a few weeks had passed, they had changed the course of his life. From his personal collection, he pulled out a crystal ball no larger than a golf ball, his most prized possession. He placed it on the table, and it immediately began to glow with a soft blue-green light. Images formed within the crystal, not projected, but somehow contained within the structure itself. High Counselor Belthar appeared, rejuvenated, his skin glowing, radiating vibrant patterns of thought and emotion. "This recording is for you alone, Marcus Chen," the mental voice said. "As clear as it was 50 years ago. What you experienced aboard our ship represents only a small fraction of who we are. For millions of years, we have traveled the stars not to conquer or colonize, but to understand." The image shifted, revealing breathtaking vistas of Taylorian worlds, crystal cities that grew rather than were built, vast gardens where plants and buildings were indistinguishable, oceans where bioluminescent patterns transmitted complex mathematical theorems across planetary distances. "We have fallen many times throughout our history," Belthar continued. "Civilizations rise and fall like the tides, but we survive because we remember. Our greatest achievement is not technology, art, or science, it is memory, the unbroken chain of experiences since our first awakening." The crystal darkened for a moment. Then it showed images of conflicts in Taylorian history, brief and terrible wars that nearly wiped them out as a species in their youth. "We, too, were violent, territorial, and fearful, but we evolved beyond that, not through genetic engineering or artificial selection, but by choice. Each generation chose peace over war, cooperation over conflict, conservation over destruction. It took us 1,000,000 years to overcome our violent instincts. Some species never do." Marcus watched, as always, mesmerized by the chronicle of a civilization so ancient that human history seemed but a blink of an eye. When he first received this crystal, he was a young man, recently rescued in a remarkable way. Now, as an old man facing what was likely his final battle, the message took on new meaning. The crystal's final images revealed thousands upon thousands of stars, seen from angles never before seen by any human. "We gave you this recording not as a burden, but as a gift, a reminder that the universe is vast beyond comprehension, full of wonders beyond imagination, and that any consciousness, no matter how brief, is priceless. Remember us, Marcus Chen, not as saints or gods, but as companions in the great mystery of existence." When the recording ended, Marcus carefully returned the crystal to its protective case. The Taylorians had given humanity more than the life of a miner. They had shown a glimpse of what a truly mature civilization could become, given enough time and wisdom. On the Bridge of Vengeance, Admiral Rodriguez studied a detailed tactical analysis of past Zephyri campaigns. Their playbook was always the same, overwhelming force applied with methodical precision, showing no mercy, taking no prisoners. Her navigators moved in perfect formations, their tactics unchanged for centuries because they never had to adapt. "Their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness," Mitchell said, analyzing the battle plans. "They've never suffered a defeat, so they've never learned from their mistakes. They've never faced an enemy who thinks fundamentally differently than they do." Mitchell nodded, making final adjustments to the simulation. "They evolved from patient, territorial ambush predators. They attack from a position of absolute advantage. We evolved from persistent hunters who stalked their prey until it was exhausted. They wait for the perfect moment. We continue to move forward, no matter what. And that's why, Rodriguez said quietly, we will win. Not because we have better technology or more powerful ships, but because they expect us to fight like they do. When we don't, when we fight like humans, they won't be able to adapt quickly enough. As the fleet approached Silurian space, a transmission was broadcast to all ships. It contained no orders or tactical information, only a simple recording from Marcus Chen, which every crew member watched silently. The elderly diplomat stood before the starfield, his face marred by age, serious but determined. 50 years ago, he had drifted alone in space, waiting to die. Strangers from across the galaxy had found him, rescued him, and asked nothing in return except to be remembered for their kindness. Today was their chance to repay that debt, not because they owed it, not because they were ordered to, but because it was the right thing to do. He paused. Then he smiled faintly. The Tylorians have a saying, the universe remembers every act of compassion. Today, they made sure the universe remembered them. Across the fleet, final preparations were underway. Weapons were checked, shields calibrated. Battle plans were reviewed for the last time in fighter hangars and engine rooms, on bridges, and in mess halls. The men and women of the human fleet prepared to face incredible hardships for a debt accrued before many of them were born. They were the finest of humanity not because they were perfect, but because they embodied the best qualities of their species, adaptability, determination, and the ability to risk everything for a cause greater than themselves. Faced with overwhelming odds, they found not despair, but resolve. They would fight not only for the Tylorians, but for the principle that debts of honor transcend time, space, and even species. As they approached the border of former Silurian territory, long-range sensors began to detect evidence of systematic destruction wrought by the Zephyrians. Entire star systems showed signs of total orbital bombardment, their planets stripped of resources, their populations annihilated. The peaceful, knowledge-based Tylorian civilization was being methodically wiped from the face of the Earth. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from a fleet of Tylorian refugees, the communications officer reported. Her voice trembled with emotion, and the main screen flickered to life, revealing the aged face of High Counselor Beltar. 50 years had taken their toll on the Tylorian leader. His once radiant, glowing skin was now pale and dull, and his large, dark eyes were filled with the indescribable pain and heaviness of witnessing the destruction of his entire civilization. Marcus Chen spoke in his mind, with the same serene clarity Marcus remembered decades ago. You have aged, my friend. I feared we would never meet again, especially under such tragic circumstances. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes shining with tears he hadn't shed in decades. I gave you my word 50 years ago, Counselor. I promised humanity would remember. We will keep our promises. I see it now, Beltar replied, his gaze sweeping over the vast human fleet appearing on his sensors. Though I fear you have come too late to save much of what we once were, our homeworld fell 3 days ago. The ancient libraries of Luminera, repositories of knowledge accumulated over millions of years, are reduced to ashes. Los Zephyrianos is the systematic cataloging of new overhangs ever since, eliminating Los refugees as if they were being deported. The first thing I did was to destroy the Tylorian city. The Belarusian transmission of visual registers of destruction. Images that appear in pantalas of retribution, and tripulations of Puente in terrifying silence, the crystal manholes of Luminera, which, before kilometers of Alzaban, were on El Cielo, and they had children who were calcinados for orbitales bombings, Fuerzas Terrestres Zephyrianas recorrían las ruinas destruyendo metodicamente cualquier archivos encontran que encontraron. The captured archivist of Tyloriana, a frail and ancient figure, opens the way to the crystal vault when the Zephyrian soldiers are killed. No intention, Hur and I Lucar. Just raise the pie with a decent power outage during a drop in energy prices. The crystal archive was destroyed in seconds. 50,000 years of scientific knowledge annulled in an instant. No explanation for Beltar. This is the deep sorrow he feels when his brother Lagrimas and various thoughts about human tribulations. Boron, our history.